Good morning, everyone. My name is Janet Hoder, and I'm Senior Communications Specialist with CGIAR. I'd like to welcome you to today's session, Building Pathways Toward More Climate Resilient Food Systems. CGIAR's 2030 innovation strategy sets out to transform food, land, and water systems in a climate crisis. To deliver on this strategy, we have launched a portfolio of more than 30 research initiatives addressing key development challenges across 5 areas of impact, developed in close collaboration with our partners. Today, we'll take a closer look at 4 of those initiatives. These are the initiatives on agroecology, sustainable intensification, nature-positive solutions, and excellence in agronomy. Before we turn to the scientists engaged with each of these, I'd like to introduce Martin Kroff, CGIAR's Managing Director for Resilient Agri-Food Systems, to provide some context for today's discussion. Martin, over to you.
A pity that I couldn't be there anymore because of flight problems and things, so I left the COP yesterday, unfortunately. But anyway, it's great that you're all there in the food pavilion, and let me share some introductory thoughts with you about these 4 initiatives, because these 4 initiatives are at the heart of the Resilient Agri-Food Systems Science Group area that I have the honor to lead in the CGIAR, the new portfolio. And it's very important also to get your input and suggestions. Some people think, we should make it one initiative, but I think it's very important that we have these different entry points. But of course, these initiatives work closely together, and that's why today we will have a look here. So I'm trying to share my screen. Janet, is it working?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Because I don't see myself at the moment, but it doesn't matter. So building pathways towards more climate-friendly food systems. And we see in the globe, in the world, that people have different approaches to do this. And so these initiatives are aligned with those, but we in the CG bring them also together. That's why it's so nice that everybody is here today. Now, I'm trying now to move my slides, but that's not working. Okay, come. Let me try to do it again. And otherwise, you have a version there, maybe, Janet. So share like this. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So still okay, I assume, Janet, otherwise tell me. So there are multiple pathways to build climate-friendly food systems, as you know, and people use different terminology. You will see that in these initiatives. But of course, there's a lot of things that are having similar targets and similar approaches, but coming from a different angle. And that's why it's important to have the whole spread of ideas that we can use, but we are still, whatever we do, science and evidence-based. So let that also be the guideline. We are a CGIAR, we are a research organization for development with impact at scale. That's what we do already, but we want to have more impact. So CGIAR takes a consistent partnership-focused, demand-driven approach. So we are not just coming in a country and say, we're going to do this and this, because basically we respect what's going on in the country, and we, of course, want to make sure that we work on the issues of the farming system, of the government, and of the consumers in the region, together with our partners in the region. So co-develop, co-create, listening to farmers and consumers as well, by the way. So joining forces to create a framework for more productive, nutritious, sustainable, and socially just food systems, and that are part of the solution to the linked and urgent challenges of climate change and food security. So I won't go into the details about all the problems, because last week at the COP, we had so many presentations on all the problems, and you have to be careful that you don't get depressed from it, but because we have to make sure that we keep on finding and trying to find solutions for those living on less than $2 a day, and most of the time smallholder farmers. So 500 million of them. So the new research and innovation strategy of the CGIAR is novel approaches to confront food, land, and water crisis through scaling, action areas, performance management, etc., with a fresh portfolio of initiatives, 33, to deliver a new 10-year strategy. So it's a lot of initiatives, but it also gives the opportunity to have the different focus. because basically it's 33 big initiatives. So the smallest one is $4 million a year. And of course, that's next to the 2,000 bilateral projects that we have at CGIAR, like any organization. But these are coherent set of initiatives. So 5 impact areas was already mentioned by Janet, but here you see them nicely with a picture. And these are very much linked with the SDGs. And I would like you to focus also on gender equality, youth, and inclusion, because we have to really make sure that the young people want to be the farmers of the future, that they want to keep on doing that very, very, very hard job. And we have to make sure that we simplify it for them and help them. Now, we have a portfolio with thematic initiatives, like the ones that we discussed today. Um, um, and we have regionally integrated initiatives where we bring together the 3 science group areas, like um, sustainable system transformation, which is more governance and those kind of things. We have genetic innovations, better seeds that are adapted to the local environment, and of course, resilient agri-food systems in the middle. Now, we have 2 types of initiatives, more the thematic ones, on genetics, on management of crops, livestock, fish, foresighting. They work globally, and we have regionally integrated initiatives. They are building on big bilateral systems that we had already, but they focus on pressing regionally unique and relevant agri-food system crises. So from a demand-driven approach. And they are highly partner demand responsive and link innovation across CGIAR. And they come up also, of course, with questions coming to the thematic initiatives to find solutions. Because we need a systems approach, but we need solutions as well. Now, I must say that the initiatives we discussed today are also a bit special because they contribute in a broader way than just, for example, just soil science or just nutrition studies or just breeding. So these are broader, and that's why it make them exciting. So they are very closely working also with the regional integrated initiatives. So the overarching objective, as I see it for the RAFS area, is to support with research transformation of food systems for affordable, sufficient, and healthy diets produced within planetary boundaries, but also in a climate crisis. So it's one sentence, but it's enormous, the task that we all have to work on this. So we work on gaps in agriculture productivity. For example, in Africa, where we have a gap of 80% of the yield potential. So we have 1 to 2 tons per hectare, and in many countries, not all. Some countries are already beyond 3.5 tons of maize, for example, in Ethiopia and Kenya and Nigeria. So, but in many countries, there's still a huge gap in agriculture productivity. Increasing demand for more nutritious food, threats to human health, the expanding environment footprint of agriculture, vulnerability of smallholder farmers and food producers. Like, for example, in Africa, and the COP is in Africa now today, Africa is of an important focus, although it's, of course, global, but the environmental footprint is enormous, and we can't use more land, transfer more land to agriculture. It doesn't make sense. We have to protect nature as well. So we have to also work on the degraded soils. So unequal access to inputs and innovations experienced by women and youth. So major challenges, but together we can do it. Now, what is the approach also that we take in RAFS is that the food system is central here. So we start with the consumer, make it demand-driven breeding, then the seed systems, then management of crop, livestock, and fish, post-harvest processes, then markets, and then back to the consumers. This is a simplified scheme, of course, but it's a very complex systems in some cases. In some cases, it's very simple and direct. The regional ones take the whole system into account, including the policies and the transformation, the genetics and the management. But of course, in the initiatives is more thematic, although, as I said, the initiatives you will see today that we are discussing are broader as well. So system transformation, resilient agri-food systems and genetic innovations, 5 impact areas, I explained them already. And in the middle, of course, regionally integrated initiatives. And I really hope that we will have many more in the future. Now, we have theories of change. It sounds very bureaucratic, but it is very important because we want to have impact. We don't want to be just a science organization with nice journal articles and things. We publish as well, but we want to make sure that our initiatives with the work packages and have impact at scale. Not impact for small pilots, impact for hundreds of thousands and also in the end, millions of farmers, that we really are part of the solution together with our partners. Let me say it again, we all do this together with our local partners and international partners. So we have initiatives together, we have the action areas, the three of them, like the RAFs area, and then together CGIAR, we have impact and we want to expand the impact. And here you see the different initiatives and all the linkages they have. And the initiatives we have here have many of those linkages, fortunately. So I'm pleased also that we have these approaches and that they also work together. Now, this is also a nice way of showing it as well. Of course, they all work actually on all the impact areas we see here: climate adaptation, environmental health, nutrition, gender and youth, and poverty reduction. But some of them are more focused on specific aspects, like excellence in agronomy is also looking at the business case of the farming system. It's broader, but also focusing, of course, on all the other elements like climate change, mitigation and adaptation. Nature positive, of course, is very much coming from the environmental component, but also focusing on agriculture and making sure that all the other impact areas are there. And agroecology is also using a systems approach. I used to call myself an agroecologist and an agronomist, so you also see that they are interlinked. But in agroecology, we try always, as much as possible, but hopefully in agronomy as well, to find solutions that are coming from ecological processes. And of course, minimization of pesticides and things, although in some cases we have to use them. Sustainable intensification, this is very important for mixed farming systems. So here we look not just on cropping systems and things, but on mixed farming systems. And also sustainable intensification is a term I like very much because in many of the smallholder farming systems, we need to intensify. So globally, we have to reduce maybe fertilizer use, but in countries with smallholder farmers like in Africa, where we use 10 kg nitrogen per hectare, we need to enhance fertilizers. But then hopefully with legumes, we can do the nitrogen, and with rock phosphate, we can also complement the whole thing. So the 4 initiatives, key elements, and you will see more about it later. Let me start with nature positive, because we all want to do things that protect nature. So biodiversity for food and agriculture, focusing on soil management and improvement with higher organic matter, water management, waste. And this is a very important one that this one is focusing on to make sure that we have also biocircular approaches. And several of the other initiatives as well, but here it's a specific focus and environmental protection. Then we have agroecology, agroecological living landscapes. That's more at the higher scales as well, and agroecological innovations. And they go also down to, of course, the field level. Sustainable agroecological transitions, food security, nutrition, and increased farmer profitability. So you see also here, it's not that we leave the farmer alone, but also we try to find solutions that are for the farmer and also for the consumer. Then sustainable intensification. Let me also make sure that I can read it myself. So crop livestock integration, very important. Sustainable intensification. So intensify, but we need to have higher productivity in many cases, because when we go with 2 billion extra people in the coming 30 years, we need to enhance our productivity. We maybe even have to double it. So multi-criteria assessments, resilience and food security. And last but not least, people think that this is a bit traditional excellence in agronomy, but it's not. This is agronomy of the next decades, I would say. I wanted to say the next century, but this, of course, the next decades. Agronomy at scale. So this is using all the modern tools possible that can be made available for smallholder farmers. So crop, soil, water, and nutrient management with the modern tools, with smartphones, with applications. And also mechanization is a very important one here, because I believe also that smallholder farming for the coming decades is not going to be possible without proper mechanization. The young people must be helped to do it in a better way. So climate change, adaptation, mitigation, also soil health, sustainable intensification. So you see, they have similar targets, but have different entry points. They work on different cropping systems or livestock systems. and in different countries as well. And there's also some areas where they work together. So I look forward to the presentations and the discussions afterwards. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Martin. I'd now like to turn to Carlo Fata, Principal Scientist at the Alliance of Bioversity International and CIAT, and lead of the CGIAR Research Initiative on Nature Positive Solutions, to provide our first initiative profile. Carlo, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Janet. Thank you, Martin, for the introduction. This one. Yeah. So as Martin was saying, Nature Positive is one of the pathways that the CGIAR has identified to move towards sustainability. And it has the concept of Nature Positive, the work around Nature Positive has its origin on the Food System Summit of last year. And basically, it's important to consider the context in which agriculture is taking place and the negative impact that agriculture has to our environment, to our health. And Nature Positive tried to tackle that in a kind of transformational way. We fully realize that there are aspects that it's impossible to disentangle the different crises that we are in. The degradation crisis, the nutrition crisis, the climate change crisis, the loss of biodiversity crisis. They need to be treated as one, and for that to be possible, you need to have a systemic approach. And this is how we have been designing, based a little bit on the definition of the Nature Positive as it came out from the Food System Summit, but we are refining and putting much more thinking into it. We have designed around 5 work packages. The first work package is conserve. We need to conserve the biodiversity. We need more nature. We need to have a more, if you want, nature-centric approach that compensate a little bit the anthropocentric approach that agriculture has today. And so we need this to conserve. We need to conserve the biodiversity, the agrobiodiversity, the soil biodiversity. There are a lot of things that need to be conserved as a natural capital to be used in Work Package 2, which is more about the management. How do we manage agrobiodiversity? How do we manage tree diversity? How do we manage the soil diversity? How do we use better water? And how do we use all of these to improve the livelihood conditions of the farmers? So the second work package has 2 pathways. One is about the management of that biodiversity elements and water, and then the second pathway is about value chain. How do we realize that there is that the only way to mainstream and to make sure that biodiversity becomes an important part of any production system is if we can add value to it, if farmers can benefit from it, if it can contribute to economic growth of countries. The third one is restoration. Agriculture is responsible for over 80% of deforestation. We know that 40% of land, agricultural land is degraded. And we know that this process is accelerated. No? We've been hearing throughout the year about the rate of deforestation in the Amazon, for example. So that work package aims not only at restoring land, but also preventing new degradation to take place by making the production system more sustainable. And then the fourth one is about recycling and agro-waste management. It's a lot of waste is produced. We have the animals, we have the food waste, and many other aspects that can be used that if they go to the environment, they are a source of pollution, but actually could be a livelihood opportunity. So everything that is around circular economy needs to be promoted as part of these integrated, better managed production systems. And finally, policy. We know that there are $700 billion incentives that go into promoting practices that are destructive of the environment, that are responsible for those 4 crises. It's a lot of money, and some of which can be actually used and diverted to support the transition towards more nature-positive production systems. And one key feature of this is really about understanding the true cost of food. There has been a study in the US by the Rockefeller Foundation, in which the cost of food is $1 trillion in the US, but the true cost of food, when you add environmental externalities, social externality, health externalities, $3 trillion. So we think that by calculating the true cost of food, we could give a measure of the kind of investment that is needed to convert production into a greater nature-positive solutions. We will do this in 5 countries: Burkina Faso, Colombia, Kenya, Vietnam, and India, largely starting with 10 communities, and really with the aim of showing that an alternative pathway to conventional agriculture is possible. So we need to monitor it. This is new. It's new for the CGIAR. Probably it's quite new generally. So we need to understand what do we need to measure. We need to, and I go to the different KPIs for the different work packages. So we need to have strong indicators about biodiversity and agrobiodiversity. And I mentioned biodiversity because, for example, according to IPBES, we need 20% more nature in production systems. So indicators for soil health, including the biodiversity, the soil biodiversity. We need not only markets that I mentioned before, but also payment schemes. We want the public to jump in to support communities that are conserving. On the management, we need to be able to monitor the number of species that are used in production system and the income generated by the value chains. We need to measure the hectares that are restored by the Work Package 3 on restoration. And we need to understand how and measure how the value chains generated through the circular economy actually contribute to improving livelihood of women, youth, and all the farmers. And finally, we need to really test, even at the political level, if the true cost accounting is the right way to actually give the information to the farmers, to the policymakers to invest more in nature-positive production. Thank you.
And thank you, Carlo. I'd next like to welcome Mandlankosi Nkomo, Chief Growth Officer at the International Institute for Tropical Agriculture and a scientist with the Excellence in Agronomy Initiative, to share a profile of that work.
Good morning. I think both Martin and Carlo have really laid a very good foundation about the need for us to be integrated. And I think with excellence in agronomy, what this initiative is really trying to do is to first of all unlock the power of the science that sits in at least over 10 CG centers. We have been working over the last half a century on crops and also on the agronomy experiments associated with that. What we're finding, and I think you'll agree with me, is that even though we've done a lot of this work, if you go to smallholder farms across the global south, we are not really seeing the uptake that the science suggests we should have. Yields are still below what they should be. There's still a lot of practices that farmers are doing that are not really in line with current knowledge. And more importantly, the national systems themselves are still giving out a lot of information to farmers that is actually dated. So there's really a need for us to, as Martin says, to move to what we are calling the new agronomy and agronomy at scale. And if you look at the CG and the investments that the CGIAR has been making over the last half a century, agronomy is really at the heart of what the CG is trying to do. Why? Because if we're going to have a transformation of agriculture, particularly in smallholder systems, that transformation is going to take place on small farms. So if we're not able to influence and get farmers to take on new practices, then a lot of the initiatives that we are trying to do are not going to have an impact. So it's important that we are able to connect the impact areas that we as the CG are trying to achieve, connect those impact areas with what really needs to happen at a farm level. And if you look at the impact areas that I think Martin also touched on, the first one around climate adaptation and mitigation really requires that farmers' practices move in a different direction in order to help them to respond better to the climate crisis that they are facing. Because when the droughts come, when the floods come, when the temperature issues come, farmers must have a solution at hand. And how do we get that knowledge and science into their hands so that they're able to do that? We do need some diversification and other interventions to allow us to move in that direction. If we look at nutrition, if we look at environmental health and biodiversity, which I think Carlos spoke a lot about, issues of soil health management are things that need to become possible for farmers to do themselves without too many external inputs coming into the picture. And I think if we're able to do that, it's going to give us a much stronger platform, I believe, to be able to move towards poverty reduction and also to get to gender and gender equality and youth and social inclusion. So we've come up with a concept which I have to admit we have borrowed from our breeding colleagues. And this concept is what we're calling agronomic gain. With genetic gain, it's very easy to measure the benefits that accrue because of the varieties that farmers now have access to. But from an agronomic perspective, what would that framework look like? So through an incubation phase that we ran for about 18 months, we've kind of honed in on a couple of things. And our belief is that if we're going to achieve excellence in agronomy and agronomic transformation, we really need to put a number of tools into the hands of farmers and to move the dial in 4 very important areas. And those 4 important areas relate to yield. I come from Southern Africa, and one of the neighboring countries that we have in Southern Africa is Zambia. They have gone for almost 15 years without having a food shortfall. So they are hitting a surplus. But if you look at the numbers, most of Zambian farmers are still not able to deliver more than 1 ton per hectare of maize. If you look at the investment that is being made in terms of fertilizer and the access to hybrid seeds, it doesn't add up. There's a lot of investment in crop nutrients, there's a lot of investment in good varieties, but the yields, if you look at the whole country, are still much, much lower than they need to be. So there's an issue there around yield gap. There's an issue around yield stability when the climate changes. And most importantly, it's really difficult to make a business case for some of the agriculture that is being done by smallholder farmers. So for us, it's important to be able to provide solutions that can help to build a situation that allows us to close the yield gap which farmers are facing. I think the second issue, and Martin spoke about this, is the issue of resource use efficiency. If we look at the drudgery that is currently associated with smallholder farming systems, and the fact that there is really a huge move of people moving from rural areas to urban areas, very soon the biggest challenge we are going to face is the aging population of farmers across the global south. So how do we introduce scale-appropriate mechanization that can help to deal with this? What are the practical solutions? What are the models when it comes to the equipment? What are the models when it comes to the service provision model? And how do we do this at scale? I spoke earlier about this issue of yield gap, and one of the issues is the inefficient use of fertilizers and other crop nutrients. And right now, I think we are staring down the gauntlet because with the increase in fertilizer prices, it's really unaffordable for farmers to even use fertilizers. or even use them inefficiently, which is what has been happening for quite a while. So we hope that we can respond to this issue of resource use inefficiency through this initiative. The third one is soil health. Soil health, I think, features in all the other initiatives that you'll hear about today because it's very important. If we do not take care of our soils, we are really creating the recipe for disaster. But how do we make it possible, first of all, for farmers to know the status of their soils? Do we give them complicated soil results from the laboratories, or do we give them visually easy to interpret soil status reports and then indicate solutions that they can use within their environment? I think that's going to be important. And then the fourth one is the issue of climate adaptation and yield stability. The theme of this conference is action, action, action. And the question that I think we are trying to answer as Excellence in Agronomy is what action, in what form, and how do we make it more readily possible for farmers to do this? So with these four KPIs, we are building an initiative that is across these 11 centers with over 100 scientists to really try and drill down and build the next generation of agronomic solutions that farmers can take up at scale and deliver the transformative agenda that we need. I'll stop here for now because Janet is giving me the look, so we can carry on during the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandela. I guess there is a look. Turning back to our virtual presenters, I'd like to introduce Marcelo Quintero, Liver Director for Multifunctional Landscapes at the Alliance of Bioversity International in CIAT, and lead of CGIAR's research initiative on agroecology. Marcelo, we look forward to hearing more about this initiative.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
We can hear you and we can see your slides.
Perfect, thank you very much. And then I'm going to speak very quickly about this other initiative on agroecology that is part of the system transformation portfolio of the CGIAR. And then, as I already said, it's part of these different approaches that we want to test and evaluate that can help us to reach food systems that are more sustainable, equitable, and especially resilient, not only to climate change, but also to the other shocks that are currently affecting our food systems. So agroecology comprises a set of principles that are the ones here in this diagram. And here what I wanted to highlight is that these principles, many applied at the agroecosystem level, like for example, soil health, input reduction, animal health, but others imply working beyond the agroecosystem level and more at the food system level to see how fairness, incorporation of social values, economic diversification, better governance on natural resources and land can also be improved in that those food systems where agroecosystems are a part of it. So basically what I'm trying to see is that when we talk about a transformational agroecology, we are talking about changes at the agroecosystem level, but also at the food system level in order to maximize the incorporation of these principles. So then again, talking about agroecological transformation and how that is envisioned, this has been already proposed by different scientists and based on evidence on how this transformation occurs. So basically in this diagram, what I'm showing is that this transformation, yes, starts at the farm system. And in the farm system, we are looking not only for more efficient use of input, but also to maximize the reduction of environmental damage, and moreover to take these systems to a level where we can maximize also the use of ecological processes for soil fertility, nutrient cycling, and retention. So basically what I'm saying is that in agroecosystems, we can incorporate changes that can help on this. And depending on how drastic are those changes, then that incremental change in the agroecosystems increases from the status quo, that is level 0, to even to the resign completely of the agroecosystem, that is level 2. However, the transformation that cannot stop there, because we need to ensure that those changes are going to be long-lasting, and also to make sure that other food system actors are aligned towards those changes. So there is also like a sort of collective action with other food system actors, including consumers, including food buyers, and other food system actors that can support and maintain those changes that happen at the farm level. And then it means that agroecology nowadays is not working only on the farming practices, but really also looking in those interactions between farmers and markets and the policy enabling environment for supporting this transformation. And this is important because practices alone are not enough to transform the system at the level that is required to really respond to these global challenges that has been discussed over the past week at the COP. So really we need to work also on how, for example, markets and policy are configured and see how this can be reshuffled in a way that can support also a more sustainable production of food. So this is an example of a recent study that we published, where basically we review different case studies in 4 different countries. And basically we were reviewing here different status of agroecological transitions. And of course, that agroecological transitions look very different from one country to the other because the systems are different, the political setting, the way markets are structured, and so on. But here, what is important is that then we analyze in what stage of the agroecological transition these countries were, and where are the next steps to kind of keep this transformation. And then here, I just wanted to highlight that depending on where these countries were in the agroecological transition, the next step was related not necessarily on changing the farming practices, because in some cases those were already changed and improved, but were more, for example, on making sure that they have vehicles to connect to also markets that can contribute to a more responsible consumption, for example. So having this in mind is that then we designed this new initiative on agroecology in the CGIAR that is cognizant of these differences across countries, that is also aware that the agroecological transition may have already started in some of these countries. So our contribution needs to be cognizant of that and be relevant for the stage at where they are in the agroecological transition. In these 7 countries, we are working in different type of landscapes with different type of farming systems and different socio-political systems. And here, the idea of the initiative that through the different work packages that we have and together with our partners, we are going to be working on the co-creation of innovations. It means innovations that are prioritized and co-created with the stakeholders in each of the sites where we will be working, that are basically, we are talking about landscapes that are niches of innovations. And those innovations could be institutional or technological or both. And then we will be working on inclusive business models to help those innovations to be widespread, and also on the policies and institutional arrangements conducive to agroecological transitions. And then also we will be contributing with science-based evidence on what works, what doesn't work, and for who in these agroecological transitions. And also we will have a new area of research that is more about understanding what influenced behavioral change in those transitions. So our outcome targets is that after 3 years, we in these 7 countries, we will have a different type of food system actors involved in the effective co-design, test, and assessment of context-specific agroecological innovations, and then having those agroecological innovations supported by strategic business partnerships and financial mechanisms, and also all the methods, the tools, the evidence, and even the co-design innovations can also be applicable to at least 2.2 million farmers that we have assessed have very similar conditions to those with who we will be working in these 7 countries. So I want to stop here and then pass the floor to my next colleague, who's going to be showing also one of the other approaches. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcela. And indeed, staying with our virtual speakers, I now turn to Fred Cuzzito, Senior Scientist at the Alliance of Bioversity International and CIAT, and lead of the CGIAR Initiative on Sustainable Intensification. This is the 4th of our 4 profiles. So Fred, if I could ask you to come in and share that work with us.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, colleagues, and great to be part of this discussion. A lot of justice has already been done by my colleagues, so I guess I have an easy path here. I'll be quite brief. The initiative we're discussing is very complementary to all the others that have been presented before you. This is around sustainable intensification for mixed farming systems. And we're doing this, like Martin rightly said, with a lot of partnerships that are really the movers and shakers on the ground. Here, the key take home I want you to take is that we're really working with a lot of private and public sector entities across 6 countries. That is Bangladesh, Ethiopia, Ghana, Malawi, Nepal, and Laos. These are really our key movers on the ground, and these 8 other CGIAR centers are really intrinsic and part of this. Of course, we also have other international agricultural research centers. I've only represented some of them, but without our partnerships, we can't really make a lot of progress. The key challenge we're really looking at is that a lot of production is really taking place in the global south, but a lot of this is really component-based and it comes with its own trade-offs. But what we're trying to propose here is that with sustainable intensification, you can produce more on the same piece of land while you're reducing your actual environmental footprint within these farming systems. We're using a dual approach where here I would like to share with you what we call the livelihood lens that really considers the technical, social, as well as economic aspects and cultural conditions within the different landscapes where we're working. Here you can see right here that we're looking at the socioeconomic, genetic, as well as ecological intensification, and its presence and that is taking place is really an aspect that is very related to the way the interactions are taking place within the landscape. And this is more exemplified at the interconnectivity, you know, within these farming systems. They're taking place at different scales, at farm, plot level, as well as community and household. And I think the way Mandla exemplified it for the case of agronomy actually really brings out the story very well. But the take home from this is that we're really doing all this to achieve key outcomes that Martin rightly emphasized there. There is an outcome also around food and nutritional security. There's an outcome around improved livelihoods, but also ensuring that the resilience and adaptive capacity of the communities we're working in is also maintained. This is really taking place across 6 countries, like I said. I won't delve much into this slide. I want you to take home the message that these different shaded areas are straddling across different countries, but these countries are having something in common. The common strand or denominator is mixed farming systems. So these are crop, livestock, mixed farming systems. So lessons learned from one country can then easily straddle and be used as a key entry point to other countries to have that impact at scale. And we have this across 5 work packages. This is a really busy slide for you to take in, but the 5 work packages around looking at future trends and dynamics, as well as looking at the methods and tools. But the glue of it is looking at the participatory action methods where we're dealing with the lower scale of smallholder farmers and doing things on the ground, but then we scale this out in work package 4 and then build capacity as a cross-cutting area. There are 4 other cross-cutting themes here around gender, scaling readiness, media, and as well as comms. Now, having said all this, the reason why we're all here together is that these 4 initiatives have been really harnessing collaborative opportunities across their different strengths, and we're really looking at having a common assessment of key performance indicators within each initiative. We're also looking at co-location of activities for countries such as Ghana, Ethiopia, and Malawi, and this is really applicable for both excellence in agronomy and sustainable intensification. We're looking at the collaborative effort on development of a global framework, and Martin explained this in the opening session. We also are developing a concept paper to present a really common vision on popular paradigms across the initiatives, but also highlighting areas where we are complementary, but also where we're actually different. Like you have seen from Marcela's presentation, we're really looking at different countries, but a lot of tools, methods, and approaches could be used from one country to another. And exemplary to what is being done now, we're jointly really sharing these kinds of lessons and entry points with a global audience like at this COP27, and we intend to do the same at the CBD conference in Canada. I really appreciate you giving us your attention, and looking forward to the upcoming discussions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fred. And of course, perhaps the most important part of gatherings such as these is the opportunity to engage in discussion. And that's what we're going to turn to now. So if I could invite Carlo and Mandla to come and join me up here. And we would love to hear your questions. And while you think about those, I'm going to pose one to our panelists. I'm going to ask all 4 of them. We have Marcela and Fred still with us. We'll get their cameras back up. But let me go ahead and start in the room. And I'd like to ask each of our initiative representatives today to consider the question, what are your key entry points? And so, Carlo, I'm going to put you on the spot and start with you.
Yeah, it's a very important question. As I mentioned earlier, it's really to bring back nature in as an entry point to agriculture. And to do that, you need a number of things. You need, for example, to include indigenous people, the traditional knowledge. If you want to promote biodiversity and agrobiodiversity, we need to know, we need to have the knowledge about it. If we want to promote it fast, this is even more necessary. Sometimes this agrobiodiversity, the majority of agrobiodiversity is called neglected and underutilized species or forgotten crops, exactly because science is not doing research on it. So we need that knowledge, and we need to ensure that not only the research knowledge is captured, but that we also collaborate with indigenous people who knows their environment and knows about the nature. I made before a distinction between nature-centric and anthropocentric. I think we need those traditional knowledge to bring back nature into our thinking. So 2 aspects. One, bring more biodiversity as an entry point, and the second one is the traditional knowledge, without forgetting that all this needs to sustain production and productivity and needs to sustain livelihood. Thank you.
Thank you. And Fred, I know this is unfair because you just finished presenting, but I'm going to come to you next to ask about your key entry points, not only what yours are, but how would you say they differ from what Carlo just shared?
Yes, thanks a lot. Actually, I based on the kind of work we're doing, our key entry point is really looking at the interconnectivity and systems approaches, which is really forming the backbone of this initiative. We understand the diversity of farming systems as well as their multifunctional ability to interact across tree, crop, livestock components, but also we're there to develop, adapt, and scale these sustainable intensification options within these mixed systems, but to a wide range of agroecology. So I guess maybe not necessarily differ greatly, but we're kind of straddling across bigger scales and also looking at the interdisciplinary nature of sustainable intensification. And the importance here is really given to capacity development, which offers an opportunity to develop co-adapted solutions with approaches that allow improved resource use efficiency, very related to nature plus in a sense, but also better social inclusion and equity at different levels within these farming systems.
Thank you, Fred. And we'll go ahead and stay with our virtual participants for the moment. And Marcela, can I come over to you? What would you say the key entry points are for you in agroecology, and how would they differ from what you've just heard from Fred and Carlo?
Yes, thank you. Now, I will highlight three main entry points. The first one is the co-creation of innovation. We are putting a lot of efforts on developing these environments for co-creation of innovations in each of the countries we are working, and with the different stakeholders that are farmers, but not only farmers, also other food system actors. So that's very important because it also changes the way we scientists contribute to the innovation process. The second thing is on institutional innovations. That's also a very important entry point for us because, as I said, farming practices alone are not enough to make the transformation we need. So we have two important entry points there that are related with business models and markets. And the second one on policy and institutional arrangements. And the third one is, of course, the technological innovations. As I said, in some countries, for example, in India, we see a lot of progress on the agroecological transition. And there is already like a technological innovations that are already happening there. But in other countries, we see still that there is a need for technological innovations because there is low productivity, low profitability, and then there we can also contribute to facilitate that process of technological innovation. So those are the three main entry points: co-creation, institutional innovations, and technological innovation.
Thank you, Marcela. And Manzla, that means you're up. What would you say the key entry points are for excellence in agronomy, and how do they differ from the others?
Janet, I think for excellence in agronomy, we are very clear that what needs to happen is that we need to scale up uptake and use of agronomic advisory content and solutions. Therefore, our primary entry point is we want to see change at farm level. But because of who we are as the CG, we are not going to be able to get to all farms. So in our model, we are saying that we then need to build what we call, strategic partnerships or impact partnerships for impact, which are focused on delivering this last mile service to farmers. So we start off with, at the farm level, we build the ecosystem of partners that will do the final delivery of this information. And then we create the knowledge products through decision support tools, which are operating really at a system level, which all these partners can have access to and then disseminate in a validated manner. So I think we are not coming with a very different approach to our other initiatives. The difference really is that we are starting at the farm level and we are building the system from the farmers' pain points, creating the ability to deliver quality content and making sure that we can do that at scale. Because the challenge we all need to own up to for the next 10 years or so is, are we able to deliver any of these solutions at scale? If we're not going to be able to scale, we're not going to have the impact that I think we need to have. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd like to take a few minutes and see if we have any questions from our audience. We'll get you a microphone. Give us just a moment.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. My name is Engineer Keju. I'm from Nigeria. And I kept on wondering, when we're talking about delivering the services to improve agricultural system, we are looking at agriculture that is responsive to science, because it's very, very important, to the technology and also the new innovation. But I kept on wondering, the generation of farmers they were talking about in Africa, quite a lot of them are illiterates actually. The knowledge gap is very, very small. So I'm beginning to see how effective some of these things can actually be delivered to the farmers. Don't you think it is the right time for us to start building the new generation of farmers? New generation of farmers that will be able to key into the food system that will drive the future of agriculture. I think it is high time we do that. I want to see the kind of farmers that will make decision in the boardroom than the old set of farmers that we have now that make decision under the tree. So I'm now looking for the farmers that will go into the boardroom and make decision. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Do we have any others before I turn back to our panel?
Yes, thank you very much for your presentations. And I have a simple question. Many countries still depend for food production on herbicides and glyphosate and these kind of things. In many countries, there is a growing, huge discussion on the possibility of abolishing these herbicides and glyphosate. I would like to hear what is the opinion of FAO on this, or what's the opinion of your institutions that you represent? I know for a fact that if you suddenly abolish the use of pesticides and herbicides, it will be a disaster for food production, at least at the short term. So how do you envisage this? If you have any comments on this, I will be very, very happy.
We can take one more question.
Thank you very much. So, we've seen multiple approaches to the same problems. And then all 4 initiatives will produce technical solutions for the same farmers and organizational solutions for the same partners. So what are the tools and practices in the management approach to make sure that we have a single innovation and scaling approach to communicate with the fields and also the partners?
Doing a little bit of microphone acrobatics here. Okay, so I'm going to turn back to our panel. We are coming up close to the end of our time, so I'll ask you to consider the questions that have been asked and weigh in on those, and if you have any last thoughts, but let's be very brief in doing so that everybody has a chance to weigh in. Who would like to go first? Carlo, over to you.
Yeah, I think these are 3 very interesting questions. I think you're right. I mean, we need to have a new generation of farmers that are capable of capturing, of getting better use of the improvement of technologies, digital agriculture, innovation, but also considering their traditional knowledge, because there is a lot of value in that, and there is a lot of things that science can learn from that as well. So I think these farmers need to really be mindful of a broader spectrum of knowledge than the farmers that we have now. And probably elements of empowerment, equity for women and youth need to be there. On the question on glyphosate, I mean, we talk about transition. We don't talk about tomorrow stopping using certain products. So I think that it depends on, it's very context specific. There are places where the transition can last a little bit shorter, where things can never end, or so we need to be very mindful that the world is very heterogeneous. And so when we talk about banning certain products, should be having a timeline attached, because, and I think you mentioned in your question, cannot happen in one day. If you want, when you want to regenerate soil, so you can reduce the use of certain products, or maybe understanding weeds that can replace partly herbicides, because there are weeds that suppress invasive weeds. That requires time and research, no? So it's important that we work in research to answer those questions. In Nature Positive, we aim at reducing the use of those products, obviously, but we don't consider realistic that a ban that starts tomorrow is a positive option. I don't think that we talk to the same farmers or the same way. I think I would agree with what Marcela says. Is a lot, and I reiterate, the use of traditional knowledge is not, Nature Positive doesn't offer technocratic solution. We develop and we co-develop with the communities. We harness on the traditional knowledge. So we don't have a prescriptive agenda on what farmers should do to become Nature Positive. It's something that we construct together with them. And we try to build on what is already existing. We don't want to be disruptive, but improve what is already there. And as I said, we have a lot of modern technologies, digital information, digital agriculture that can benefit the farmers. So try to make sure that they can have greater use. But the two really needs to go very much hand in hand. Thank you.
Thank you. And Marcela, can I come to you next? Do you have any responses, closing thoughts? And maybe I can give you just a 1 minute to weigh in.
Precisely on that point, and this is what I was trying to also address during my presentation on agroecology, is that we are not really looking for the same solution to be applicable to all farmers. What we are saying is that really we need also to kind of change the way we also contribute with science to innovation processes. And it means that the contexts are very different. The needs are very different, and the type of knowledge that is already available in those different sites are very different. So we need to understand that and then engage in a co-creation process. It's not that we are bringing the solution as scientists, but that we contribute with our knowledge to the knowledge that the other actors have in that space to contribute to an innovation process that address their most pressing needs. And those needs are related, yes, with their farming systems and how those can be improved, but also innovations that can help also those farmers to be linked to the food systems in a more equitable way. So it's really for us, as scientists, a challenge, because it means that we cannot provide the same solution everywhere, right? So it means we need to deploy scientific teams in a very different way. And also trying to bring scientists that know very well those specific contexts. So this is what is how we are doing this in agroecology and I'm sure in many of the other new CGIAR initiatives.
Fred, can I come to you? 1 minute to offer some last thoughts or responses?
Yes, thanks a lot. Very delighted to be part of this once again. Just wanted to dive in as well on the aspect of the kinds of farmers we're looking at. The kinds of farmers, as much as we want to have that new generation, that's great. And I'm a very big proponent of digital technologies for the youth. But also, let us not give up on the current generation that is really providing, that is the food basket, as Carlo rightly said, that we do have a lot of traditional knowledge tied into that. We need to unlock that. But using Mandela's words, let us also have ways in which we communicate science into a usable form that is really tailored to the needs of these other people that can then use it and take it to scale. For me, that would be really good. And we are really doing that in the aspects of the kinds of communication materials we're sharing with the different farmers. I wanted to end this by mentioning that when I look at what we're all doing, we're really co-creating, we're co-designing, And we're going beyond technology and looking at socio-technical innovation bundles, all put together in a simple way that would really bring impact at scale. And I think this will only grow stronger as we really communicate the message that together we can afford to change science from something that is on the shelf to something that is actually usable to really bring out the 5 outcomes that Martin highlighted at the beginning of his talk. Thank you.
A really great note and an image to consider as we, as a takeaway. Mandela, can I come to you for a 1-minute wrap up and reflection from your point of view?
Thanks a lot, Janet. I think if I listen to the question from the gentleman from Nigeria and Murat, it's calling for us, I think, to become very good at a number of things. I think the first one is we need to understand the farmer typologies that we are working with. Because often we make the mistake of assuming farmers are a homogeneous group, and therefore our responses often miss the point. So at Excellence in Agronomy, we're really trying to build those farmer typologies, because it is the farmer typologies that I think are going to help us determine what the scaling pathways that are appropriate for those farmers are. Should we go analog? Should we go digital? Should we do a little bit of both? And I think that way we'll be able to take into account the issues of the ages of farmers and so forth. And I think ultimately our innovation systems need to be human-centered. They need to put the farmer at the center, because these farmers are both consumers and producers within this food system. We need to understand the incentives and the disincentives that they have to deal with. And when we tailor our support systems from the different initiatives, it needs to be from an informed position. And I think we'll be able to achieve a whole lot more that way. Thank you.
Thank you. And to end where we began, Martin, can I come back to you to see if you'd like to wrap up?
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks all the 4 initiative leads for answering and also showing that they come maybe from different angles, but they are jointly also working on solutions. It's not that they are isolated initiatives. And like what was said also, we are not going with one scaling option to the farmers. Farmers, they have to be able to have options and pick and choose. So let's also make sure that we take the farmers seriously. And it's not that we go for scaling, this is the solution, and there we go. Really good questions, by the way. So very briefly, so the knowledge gap, new generation, this is crucial. So we need to do capacity development, not just at the scientist level, but also with the farmers. And we have novel tools. Please have a look at what Shamba Shape Up is doing in Kenya. They reach by television every week 6 to 8 million farmers, and they now go to Zambia, and hopefully they go to all of Africa, to be honest, because this is with videos. With videos, we can learn so much so quickly in a simple way, much better than books or whatever, and extension people, to be honest. So the videos, that's really a way of scaling. So let's think about these young people. Many countries depend on herbicides and pesticides, I know. And in some areas, maybe we have to introduce them even when there's a big pest like Volami worm coming in, and we don't have the solution yet. So we look for new solutions like Volami worm, but then we have resistant varieties already. Let's then use the resistant varieties and not use the pesticides, right? But we need, I always say in Dutch, or that is the Dutch saying, don't throw away your old shoes when you don't have new ones yet, right? So you need solution, and then you can make a transformation. And also multiple solutions, same problem. Very good question, but we are not going with one solution. And that's what I like about this, because they're all evidence-based, and also farmers can pick and choose. So I think I look very much forward that we have a paper on this, because I think the world doesn't want scientists that are only believing in their own thing, in their own approach, but that we have a suite of approaches, because we do it for the smallholder farmers and the consumers, and they have to be able to make choices as well. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, because I really enjoyed listening to everybody.
Thank you to all of our speakers and to you all for joining us today. If you'd like to learn more about these initiatives and the full portfolio, I invite you to go to CGIAR.org and check out the Portfolio Explorer. We have several of our panelists, of course, who you can chat with outside near the coffee area so that we can make way for our next session. And if you're looking to speak with any of our speakers who joined us online, please let me know and I can connect you with them. Thank you all.
Okay, great. Bye-bye.